radical poet, playwright, film writer, screen producer, musician, actor, and revolutionary. Give it up for Boots Riley.
This is for my folkers who got bills overdue. This is for my folkers, check 1, 2. This is for my folkers, never lived like a hog, me and you, toe to toe. I got love for the underdog. This is for my folkers who got bills overdue. This is for my folkers, check 1, 2. This is for my folkers, never lived like a hog, me and you, toe to toe. I got love for the underdog. I raise this glass for the ones who died meaninglessly and the newborns who get fed intravenously. Somebody's mama caught a job and a welfare fraud case. When she breathes, she swear it feel like plastic wrap around her face. Lights turned off. This the third month the rent is late. Thoughts of being homeless, crying till you hyperventilate. Despair permeates the air and sets in your hair. The kids play with that one toy they learned how to share. Coming home don't ever seem to be a celebration. Bills stay piled up on the coffee table like they decoration. Heaping spoons of peanut butter, big ass glass of water. Make the hunger subside. Save the real food for your daughter. You feel like swinging haymakers at a moving truck. You feel like laughing so it seems like you don't give a fuck. You feel like getting so high you smoke the whole damn crop. You feel like crying, but you think that you might never stop. Homes with no heat stiffen your joints like arthritis. If this was fiction, it'd be easier to write this. Some folks try to front like they so above you. They tear this motherfucker up if they really loved you. This is for my folkers who got bills overdue. This is for my folkers, check 1, 2. This is for my folkers, never lived like a hog, me and you, toe to toe. I got love for the underdog. There's certain tricks of the trade to try to stop your to try to halt your defeat, like taking Tupperware to an all-you-can-eat, returning used shit for new, saying you lost your receipt, and writing 4-figure checks when your accounts deplete. Then all your problems pile up about a mile up. Think about a partner you could dial up to help you out this vile stuff. Whole family sleeping on the futon while you clipping coupons, eating salad, trying to get full off the croutons. Across town, the situation is identical. Somebody getting strangled by the system and its tentacles. Misconceptions raise questions to be solved. A lot of dope boys is broke. A lot of homeless got jobs. You can make 8 bones an hour till you pass out and still be ass out. Most pyramid schemes don't let you cash out. They say this generation made the harmony break. But crime rise consistent with the poverty rate. You take the workers from jobs, you gon' have murders and mobs. A gang of preachers screaming sermons over murmurs and sobs, saying, pray for a change from the Lord above you. They tear this motherfucker up if they really loved you. This is for my folkers who got bills overdue. This is for my folkers, check 1, 2. This is for my folkers, never lived like a hog, me and you, toe to toe. I got love for the underdog. You like this song because it's relatable. It's you in the rhyme. We go to stores that only let us in 2 at a time. We live in places where it costs to get your check cashed. Arguments about money usually drown out the tech blast. Work 6 days a week, can't sleep Saturdays though. Muscles trembling like a pager when the battery's low. And you still don't know where the years went. Although every single shift feel like a year spent. And you could write your resume, but it wouldn't even mention all the life lessons learned during 6 years of detention. And how you learned the police was just some handicappers on the ground next to broken glass and candy wrappers. So don't accept my collects on the phone. Just hit me back at the house so I know I ain't alone. And we could chop it up about this fucked up system. Homies that's been killed, how we always gonna miss them. It's almost impossible surviving on this fraction. Sip a 40 to the brain for the chemical reaction. You gotta hustle because they trying to push and shove you. I'll tear this motherfucker up since I really love you. This is for my folkers who got bills overdue. This is for my folkers, check 1, 2. This is for my folkers, never lived like a hog. Me and you, toe to toe. I got love for the underdog. So I think I should make clear that in that song, when I say tear this motherfucker up, what I mean, to be specific, and you would get this if you heard the rest of the album that song is in context with, what I mean to be specific is that we need to overthrow capitalism and create a system in which the people democratically control the wealth that we create with our labor. Now, and I chose that because a lot of my songs just, I don't like doing them a cappella, and that's one of them that I like doing a cappella, but it actually is maybe one of, it kind of falls into the category of art that has a little more doom and gloom in it that a lot of us fall into the practice of. That's a song that I wrote a while ago, although I tried to have some hope, some idea of changing the world in it. It's something that had a lot of it is very much in the vein that that artists who are trying to put in radical or progressive ideas do, which is this idea of my job is to expose the truth, right? We're told that we often have this idea that as artists, what we're trying to do is show people how messed up this system is, right? Let's detail those things, and I think that's important. But the truth that, as we all know it, most people know that this world is fucked up, right? We're not saying anything new with that. The part that we're missing is, and when we talk about why isn't everybody up in arms, why is whatever movement that we're doing not bigger? And often, pundits or, people writing about it will say that it's because people don't know the truth, or that people are apathetic. But the truth is that people are not apathetic. They're very angry about the way things are. But we haven't shown them how to change what's going on. We have not included that part in our art. We've been talking about what's messed up, but we don't even have a sense, probably most of us, we don't have a sense of how we are going to change it. So in a certain sense, we end up using our art, as we should, to express what's on our mind. But, what's on our mind is a byproduct of what's going on as artists. What's on our mind is a byproduct of the general radicals and progressive movements that are going on right now, which for the past 50 years have all but abandoned class struggle in favor of spectacle. Where right now, and that's supposed to be the artist's job, so we're confused, because if the whole point of a movement is to get people onto the street, to let our voices be heard, and that's the be-all, end-all of a movement, is to let people's voices be heard, then we're like, okay, well, we're letting our voice be heard, and there's a little bit of confusion. And that focus on spectacle that the left has had has not always been there. It's something, relatively new, and I say in the last 50 years, that came along with the new left movement. However, before that, here in the United States, there was a much more radical movement that wasn't just focused on spectacle, and it was not a different movement. It was the beginnings of what we have now. And that time period was during the 20s and 30s. During the 20s and 30s in the United States, you had people occupying factories in the Midwest. You had miners in Utah and in Colorado and in Alabama, actually in armed struggle in certain cases with the company owners. You had on the West Coast, you had the longshoremen strike, a bunch of folks who were thought to be the most unorganizable of the workers because they were thought as being less skilled than custodians, right? And they were thought to have so much more turnover, but they had a militant strike in which they were encountering tanks from the U.S. Army, things like that. This was going on during the 20s and 30s. At the same time, there was something that was somewhat unrelated, but it's still relevant. There was something called the Bonus March, in which veterans marched to the White House, many of them with guns, saying that they needed their bonus pay. It was during this, and at the same time, there was 1 million card-carrying communists during that same time, whose obviously the objective is to create a system in which the people democratically control the wealth that we create with our labor. Now, it was under this, in this atmosphere that the things that we can always, that people always tout as being part of quote unquote America came about. A lot of the things, Medicare, Social Security, welfare, you name it, a bunch of stuff that they called the New Deal, that they credit to being some benevolence of the president at the time. And it's part of this telling of this history why so many people are stuck on us trying to figure out who to elect to save us. Because they don't really tell the history that those reforms were made simply because the ruling class was scared of a possible viable revolutionary movement growing. And so from that point, so those gains were made. There was quickly, soon after that, the Communist Party, USA, and other radicals formed the United Front Against Fascism. Because the 40s came and the US was joining with Russia to defeat Hitler. And the idea was that they weren't going to challenge the US here so that the US wouldn't have any problems getting rid of Hitler and the fascist forces. That meant going underground. That meant being secretive for a good number of years. And this led to, this led to there being this time in the 50s where they could have the McCarthy era and House Un-American Activities Committee that pointed at revolutionaries and said, oh, that's a communist. They haven't been telling you. They've been hiding it for all this time. And they had been. They had been hiding it. And so that combined with revelations about atrocities that Stalin had done created all these splits. And out of these splits in the 50s grew these organizations that were the beginning of the New Left movement. The New Left movement did things differently. One thing they did really well was say, fuck that, we're not hiding anymore. We are revolutionaries, right? Very often. We're radicals, we're revolutionaries, we want to change the world. The other thing they did that wasn't, that I think proved to help us be in this place that we're at right now is that they moved away from certain areas. A lot of the areas they were in before are places that we think of as Republican bastions, and we think of as right-wing areas. Those are the red states, when back in the day they were actually red states. Radicals moved to the cities and focused on students. So in the 60s, when I went to college in the early 90s, we would always talk about, yeah, I wish it was like the 60s. Yeah, I wish it was like the 60s. And really, the 60s were a step back from what had been before. Because now you're focusing on students, and you don't have the ability to shut down things and withhold labor. Now, most folks who know how this system works, even folks that don't understand just the idea that the folks with the money have the power. And even if you don't understand, even if you're not using the lingo that radicals use, people understand that where they get their money is from their businesses. And we work at those businesses. And that shutting down withholding labor is a way to, and is the primary way that you have class struggle. However, radicals on a whole, and there are some, I only have a little bit of time, so I'm leaving out a lot of good shit that is contrary to that, but radicals on a whole left labor alone, left labor to the liberals, right? And focused on spectacle. How many people can we get in the street? Where in the 60s, it became the goal to get people on the street, and they still call it a demonstration, but that word was more applicable in the 20s and 30s when it really was simply a demonstration of power. Like, we've got 20,000 people on the street just to show you these are 20,000 people that tomorrow can go on strike and shut your business down. So do what we want you to do, right? Right now, we as radicals are telling people, you get out in the street, you let your voice be heard, and people in power are going to feel guilty, right? They're going to feel like they don't have a mandate and they got to, and what we're doing is teaching the wrong analysis. That's what we're doing. And we're doing that through words, we're doing that through art. And it's not simply the artist's fault, it's because we are following the mode that the movement is in. So it's very easy to go from movements that say, look how many people we have on the street, to voting. Because it's the same fallacy, it's the same illogical argument. Because we know that power is not in the halls of Washington. We know that power is with the puppet masters who control those puppets, right? And that we don't have a direct line to them by electing which puppet gets into office. Our direct line to them is by cutting off their profit margins, right? Then they make their puppets dance however we want them to dance, right? And we know this, but that right now, when we talk about that, that seems so different from most of the stuff we're involved in, right? So it becomes like, well, wow, we got to do things a lot differently. Because the truth is, the folks that are organizing labor right now don't have social change in mind. I'm not talking about, there's some very cool radicals that are involved in labor, but I'm talking about the heads of these major labor organizations. They're not radical in the sense of what they're doing. They're not trying to create a movement to create social change. And that's because radicals have left that area of work alone. And I'm not talking about just those unions that exist. I'm talking about there's large sectors of work that aren't organized. Anything in which you get paid a wage and they make a profit is something that we can organize, right? So why am I, okay, this is an artist conference. Why am I talking about this here? It's because we're supposedly providing some ideas to people, right, with our art. We're supposedly, and often though, if without that answer, with us just making a spectacle about what's wrong, we influence people to not do anything, right? So much of what's thought of as political music, all music is political, that's a lot of people would agree with that here. But so much of what's thought as like radical or progressive music is all about anger, right? Let's get angry. And with the idea that people aren't already angry. And so it leads to this situation where you have people listening to the music and getting pumped up, and then doing almost totally the opposite. If anger is is the end result of your art, then you leave people open to, and then there is no answer about what you're supposed to do about it, right? So therefore, your art can be, you can put that art up in the bank, because it's fine to get angry because it's still going to be here. You're not talking about doing anything about it, right? Or your music can be played to torture people because it's not really, we want you to get angry, right? It's not, the part that we need to focus on if we want to make radical art is organizing against capitalism. And it's not something we can do alone as artists. It's not something we can efficiently do alone as artists, because we can have all these ideas, we can read them in books, we can, take a class on it, and then we make a piece of art that totally misses the mark because we haven't been involved with trying to get people involved in that movement, right? We end up having a different view of what needs to be addressed. And because a lot of time, and so one of the problems that I see with my work is that a lot of times people will come up to me and be like, your music really inspired me. I've been listening to it a lot, and it really inspired me to be an artist. And okay, I'm an artist, so I can't really, but that's not my goal. I'm not trying to create more artists. I mean, I think everybody should be able to be an artist. We all don't have the time, and we all don't, that's something that should happen. But why does my work create more artists instead of more organizers? I do get people saying they became an organizer, and part of it had to do with listening to my music, but a lot of it has to do with the ability of that person who's consuming the art to go and get involved in something real, something practical, something that actually changes the material condition of their lives. And if those movements aren't within their vicinity, or if we're not leading them to those movements, it becomes a similar frustrating thing. Like, people are like, wow, okay, I want to do what he's doing because that's the only answer I see, is to put out this, to put the answer out more, But when I do see my art effective, I see it as being very much affected by my time as an organizer, as being able, which gives you a skill of figuring out how to get someone to do something, which is much different than how to tell somebody something, right? That's a whole different thing. Like, how do you, I'm gonna give you this information, and they can do whatever they want to with it. But if you have experience working on campaigns that need to get people involved in it, then you realize whether what you're saying is working or not, right? You realize whether, where people are at when you're having a conversation with people. And where is the point of contradiction that can be handled in your art, It's something that makes art more relevant. And so what I would say because the other part of that conversation is when people are like, I became an artist because of what you do, what should I do? I'm saying you need to join an organization, and you need to get involved in an actual campaign. Because this idea that an artist is over here and a hamburger cook is over here and an organizer is over here, it really doesn't happen that way in real life. And our struggle to only be one thing can only make our art less relevant. Now, of course, you need to spend time on your craft. I hate stuff that has the same ideas I have, but it's terrible. I hate that. Like, I don't want anybody to hear that. I'm like, oh, no. You know, I mean, artists, if anything, are people who are communicating but realize that that aesthetic and form are very much a primary part of any communication, right? So you have to master the form, master the aesthetic that you're using. And so that takes some time. So don't get me wrong, you can't just not focus on being an artist. Just like you can't not focus on knowing what language you're speaking to someone. You have to be speaking the same language as they speak. But in general, if we want our art to be exposing the truth, then our art has to have an analysis of the whole truth. And a real analysis of the whole truth has to do with the way that this economic system is actually forming the results of what we see every day. And the further part of that real analysis tells us that there's something to be done about that. And that something to be done is going to have to do with organizing a radical, militant labor movement that is able to use withholding of labor as a strategy and tactic for all of these things. And I'm not saying that a labor movement just has to do with figuring out how much wages we're getting. But I'm talking about something that deals with the problems that we're dealing with. I mean, how much different would that situation have been in Ferguson if for the last 25 years, radicals had been organizing labor and been able to shut down the city of St. Louis until people got what they wanted. That would have, if you shut down the city of St. Louis for 3 days, you would have seen something happen, right? And by the city, it would mean just a few of the major major industries, some of the things going down. But we're looking at all of these. Because things have become so much about spectacle, we've lost even the ability to make really effective spectacle, right? And obviously, I think spectacle is necessary. I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing if I didn't think it. But we need something real that is tangibly connected to power, that is tangibly connected to the way that power actually works. And once we start doing that, then people will look at these situations and not feel powerless and feel like there is something they can do. There's not, for instance, the truth is that there's not many black folks that don't agree with the Black Lives Matter movement, for instance. There's also not many white folks that do, but I'm using this as an example because it's the easiest. But for all the black folks that are involved, Black Lives Matter movement is still pretty small compared to the population of people that are angry about police brutality. That doesn't have to do with a lack of effort by the folks in the Black Lives Matter movement. That has to do with lack of a feeling of power that folks have, and a lack of a clear strategy for changing the world that we've been putting out. So we as artists need to be at the forefront of putting out this analysis that we need radical change through withholding of labor, and we need to create a mass, radical, militant labor movement. So that's it. I'm out of time. All right.